Welcome everyone guys, today we're going to learn how to handle network errors while connected to the sessions. Also we'll learn how to leave the session and we'll implement a list of available players once we're in the session. And moreover, if you're the host, you'll be able to kick players, but you won't be able to kick yourself. And recently I've started a Patreon, so if you want to learn more about premium VR content and premium VR functionality, you can go ahead and check my Patreon down below in the description. Make sure you subscribe to this channel if you're new, and I promise you, you won't regret your subscription. And anyway, you can cancel it anytime you want, so please consider doing it, and also make sure to leave a like and a comment on this video. I will appreciate it. So let's go to the tutorial. So basically now what we're going to do, we're going to work with our network errors. And before actually to test it, let's go to our edit, project settings, and we need to make sure that we will change our game instance to our custom class, because we have now our BP game instance. So make sure you have it. We are going to work with our BP game instance. And game instance basically remains in your game from the time you started the game until when you close the game. So it's basically a place where you have access to variable across anywhere you are in your game. So first thing I want to look at is actually two functions we have right here. So if you click on your override, you'll see network error. So let's go ahead and click on it. And afterwards, we have our travel error. And if you're kind of curious what each of those events handle, you can go ahead and switch on the failure type here and also switch on failure type here. And you can see the whole list of errors it handles. So we're not going to look into each of them. If you're curious, you can go ahead. But what we're going to do, we're just going to print the error we are witnessing when we are failing to join the server. And the same we're going to do here. And here, once error happens, we not only need to print the error type and let the user know what happens, we'll just destroy the session. And here we're going to use default online subsystem function called destroy session. And our player controller is going to be get player controller. And basically we'll connect the results of those print statements to here. Yes, that's basically it. That's how we handle all the network errors during joining sessions. And basically if someone during the game has network issue, he will also leave the game. I can show you where it happens. So we can launch for 2 players in standalone mode. And make sure you press new editor window pi. And here, once we create session on this machine, we created a session. So basically, here's our client, and he's the server at the same time. So once he witnesses network error, he'll be kicked, and all of the people who are connected to the server will be also kicked. At the same time, our game instance now is able to handle error when we are joining the session. So if during joining the session, something has happened, maybe host has disconnected or just the server became not connectable, I would say this way, we'll be kicked from anything we are on right now and we'll be joined back to our VR template map. So I hope you got it. What do we have now? We can create a session and here we can basically join the session. So I'll show you like this. But here we want to have a kind of menu so we could see the list of players and we want also to be able to leave from the server. So let's actually go ahead and do it. I will go ahead to my widgets folder, the one I created before, and I can go ahead maybe and copy one of the widgets. So I will copy WB join session and I'll call it WB player list and leave. That will be my widget. I can open it and we'll slightly adjust it. I'll go ahead and delete a vertical box I have right here. And basically I'll leave the back button. SB server list, I will rename to SB player list. It will be used for list of players that have joined. And I can go ahead and resize it. And let's go ahead and implement a leave button on our bottom left corner. So I'll copy existing back button. I will insert it somewhere here. And I will expand it. And I'll make text here leave. And I'll make this button generally reddish. And I will call it BTN leave. So we'll see some errors in our graph. So what we can do is that we can delete all we have right now. Except for the back button, we can leave the event dispatcher for back button, and I'll delete everything else like this. And let's go ahead to our button leave and add unclicked event. So what do you want to do here? We want to let the game instance know that we are leaving. For this purpose, I want to be able to call some kind of function to leave the session. So just for this, we're going to create a blueprint function library. So blueprint function library allows us to store functions that we can use anywhere in the blueprints we want. So basically those functions will be global. So I will go ahead and call it blueprint function library game functions. And in here, I will create a function called leave session. So from here, we can access our get game instance. We can cast to BP game instance. That's the one we have created in previous tutorial and the one we have been overriding some functions today. And now we have to go to our game instance and create a function, so we could call it from here. So for this purpose, I'll create a custom event here and call it leave session. So once we leave session, we want our players to join the lobby back so they could choose where they want to join. For this purpose, I will open level by name because we are considering that our default map is our VR template map. Make sure you copy it as it is because our level name registers case sensitive names. So I will go ahead and paste this name right here. Afterwards, I'll get player controller and I will destroy session on that player controller. And make sure you connect player controller here instead of world context object. That's it. Now all we have to do is to call this leave session from our blueprint function library and make sure here we have leave session and we have call function leave session, not this function right here. So leave session from our game instance like this. And on button leave, we can call leave session and you will see that it's accessible through here like this. So now what I want to do, I want to test this button. So let's go ahead to our main level where we'll be creating rooms. And by the way, a quick fix, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but if you want to have your two players spawned not in the same place, so you could have some basically rules, you can duplicate your players start. So that one pawn spawn here and another pawn spawn here. So in here, I'll just go to level blueprint. And as I've told you recently, we're using our viewport instead of actually having an actor. And how to implement the actor, don't worry, I will show it in next tutorial or this tutorial. So when we begin play, we want to add this widget to viewport. So I will go ahead, create widget. I will select WB player, list and leave. I will add to viewport and I will set render scale to 0.7. So it was not too big and too little, like this. So if we launch simulation here, we'll see that our menu has actually spawned. Let's go ahead back to our level. So it's called VR template, our default level from where we can join the session. And I will run it in new editor with 2 windows. So what we can see now is that I can create a session on this client for 5 people and we are in this level. And we can join the session through this client right here. So here's our server and here's our client. So one client created the server, meaning that this client became a host. And now this client is a host of the server. So let's call it host. And we have another, just a regular client who connects to the server. And it's just a client. So look here. Here's our client on our right. So this is the host, right? If we have our client, basically if client leaves, nothing is going to happen. The host will still have a server and will still be in that room. But let's go ahead and join again. But now if hosts leave the game, so be careful. As you can see, client received a failure and host disconnected. That's because when host disconnects, server no longer exists and it just closed. Therefore, our client will receive a network error. And as you have seen here on your top left corner, it was for 2 seconds. So I will go ahead to my game instance and I can use my debug statement for 10 seconds. So we could notice what happens. Let's try it again. So create room here. And if your cursor vanishes like mine did right now, you can press Shift F1 and it will appear back. So let's go ahead, join this room. And now if host leaves, we're receiving failure received, connection lost, because our server no longer exists and our connection was broken. That's why we have our connection lost on our client, this one right here. Okay, hope you understood this. So now once we join, we want to create a server list so that the host could kick the players and basically the players could not do anything. They could just see the list of players there is. So what I would do, as you remember in our previous tutorial, we have created a WB session item. So what we can do, we can go ahead to this WB session item, we can duplicate it and call it WB player list item, like this. And let's go ahead and edit it. So now what we can do, let's actually go ahead and rename our session name to player name. Then I will change session name text. So I will go ahead and change it to player name. So we had it on preview, then button join. I will change it to button kick, like this. I will change join to kick. Afterwards, I will delete the text from our middle size boxes so that we could have some spacing in between kick and player name. So I will delete this text and I will delete this text like this. So now we can go ahead and hit compile. We'll see a lot of errors. That's fine, don't worry. We can just go back to our event graph and in here, we can just delete all the code we have right now. And also in our designer tab, let's go to our button and set tooltip text to kick player from session. so that our user know what this button will do. And by default, as we've decided earlier, we want regular users not to have this button visible, so they're not able to kick someone, but a host would like to have those buttons be visible so that the host was hosting a room and he could kick other people. So I will go ahead to visibility and change it to collapsed by default. So let's hit compile now, go back to our graph, and here on construct, when we are constructing this player list item, we want to know what is the name of the player, right? So let's create a variable and call it username. It will be of type text, and we'll make it instance editable. So make sure you'll click on this icon right here and make it exposed on spawn, so that once constructing this widget, we could set player's name. And we're going to construct this widget in a different place, and I will show you which. So for now, just let's get username. So let's get our player name, set text to our username, like this. So now we are basically setting our username in our player list item. So in order for us to find out if it's a host or no, there's a special function, is server. This is a simple function that returns a boolean, whether we are doing this action on the server or we are doing this action on the client side. So the server side is the host. So let's check if it's the host. And in case it is, we're going to get our button kick and set visibility to visible on true. And basically all the actions we're going to do afterwards are going to be only per host. So basically that's it for a regular client. He just wants to see which player is in the game. I will comment it out and I will call it let host see the kick buttons on the players. So now we want to prevent ourselves from being kicked. Therefore, we have to hide the button for ourselves. So to do this, we also need to pass a player ID. So player ID, and we're going to use an integer. So basically player ID is 0, 1, 2, 3, and how many players you have starting from 0. And the 0th element, the 0th player that joins, is basically a host because he is the first one and he owns the server. So we'll basically check if player ID and make sure player ID is also instance editable and exposed in spawn. So we'll take player ID. We're going to check if it equals to 0, like this. And if it is, we're going to get our button and we're going to set is enabled to false. Afterwards, we're going to set tool tip text. We're going to make text. And I'm going to put here, you can't kick yourself, like this. So also I want to take my username, and for the host, I want to set username a different color. So I'm going to get my player name, set color and opacity. And here I'm going to make slate color owner, and I want the owner to be displayed in orange, yellowish, like this. Afterwards, I want to append a host after our player name. So I will get text like this. I will convert it to string. I will append space host, and I will set text to this value right here. So we can call it prevent from kicking yourself and highlight host in color, like this. So now we have everything done for our event construct. Now we have to work on some server things. So to do this, we'll go to our game mode. So again, there is only one instance on game mode, and game mode exists on a server. Therefore, our game mode, let's go to our main game mode. It has a couple of events we're interested in, and they're called onPostLogin and onLogout. So onLogin calls when player joins the game, logout when he is kicked or he quitted the game himself. So our PostLogin returns our player controller. And make sure in your game mode, in your main, we have a custom class for our player controller class. So now let's go back to our game mode. And here on PostLogin, when player joins, we need to check if his controller has to be P, main player controller. And what we're going to do, we're going to create a variable called joined players. And it's going to be of type player controller, and it's going to be an array. So make sure you choose an array here. Hit compile. Then we are going just to drag this variable here, add a player that joined to joined players, like this. So again, this variable is the same for all of the clients that join, because game mode is only on the server, therefore it's already replicated amongst all the clients. And on event logout, we do the same, but instead of adding the object, we're going to remove the player controller that leaves the game, like this. So now, after we have this information, we need to update our widget. And since our widget is on every client, there is its own instance of the widget, we need somehow to access all of the clients to see the player list the same as we do. So to do this, we cannot use game mode. And now our game state comes in. So as you remember from previous tutorial, game state exists on all of the clients and server itself. So we could send the signal from server, from game state on the server, to all of the game states on the clients and basically update their widget. So last tutorial I created a BP game state. So let's go ahead and open it. So it's called BP main game state. And basically what we do here is available on all of the players and the server. So let's create a custom event called update player list. And in our game state, we have an access to the variable called player array. So this, as you can read, array of all player states maintained on both server and clients. So basically this is the array that gives you all the joined players currently when this function is triggered. And what we can do, we can promote it to a variable and call it all player states. So, and now will be an interesting part. So we'll set this variable to OnRepNotify in replication. So what it means, we have 3 different replication types: none, replicated, and OnRepNotify. So none is just a regular variable. It doesn't replicate. And when we say replicated, and what does replicated mean, is that it will be replicated amongst all of the players. So if you had chosen none here, nothing would have happened on all of the clients. It would have happened only on the game state you're trying to set this variable on. But if you say replication to replicated, it's getting passed to all of the clients once this variable is changed. Therefore, we'll call update player list from our game mode, and once this variable changes, maybe another player joins, every game state will know this. And another type is OnRepNotify. It's the same as replicated, but as we can see, once we change it to OnRepNotify, the function onRep all player states has appeared. So if you double click on it, this function, everything we write here, will be triggered once this variable changes, meaning that once player joins or once player leaves, this function here will be triggered because this variable will be changed. So let's go ahead and onRep all player states. And what we're going to do here. So now we'll show you how to do it with viewport, but be patient, watch the videos, and we'll get to the point where I'll show you how to do it with actors. So here we'll get all widgets of class. And here, as you remember, in our main level, we spawn widget called WB player list. And here we'll choose the same WB player list and leave. Like this. So we'll go for each loop. And now from here, we have to create a function, our WB player list and leave. So let's go ahead to our widget. And in here, we have our server list. So let's go ahead and create a function for updating it. So I'll create a custom event called update list. And here we're going to get game state. We're going to cast to BP main game state. And before we actually refresh all the lists, so once every player joins, we need to clear our player list, so clear children, and generate a new one. So to generate a new one after we have cleared, we can retrieve a variable, get player list. You remember that it's a public variable in our game state, like this, player array. And we are going to use the for each loop. And on each iteration of the loop, we're going to create a widget of class WB player list item. And here you'll see we'll have username and player ID. Basically, to get player name, username, we're going to get our array element. So basically, this player array here is of type player state. So what we can do in our player state, we can get player name. We're going to convert it to text. And our player ID is pretty simple. It's going to be just array index. Afterwards, we're going to get our player list, add child, and put the return value from here to our child. And basically, that's it for update list and our WB list and leave. Now let's come back to our game state and onRep all player states. So just to remind you, that's when this variable changes. We are going to update list like this. So now this function update player list, now we have to call this function, and a good place to call this function from will be a server to replicate it to all the clients. And where is the server? Right, it's in the game mode. So game mode exists in the server, and in our game mode, we can go ahead and create a custom event, and we can call it update player list. And this function is automatically replicated, so we don't need to use any replication here since our main game mode is already on the server. And once something happens on the server, it replicates to all the clients. And here we need a little delay because we need to give our Unreal Engine some time to register the login and logout event. Afterwards, we'll just get our game states function update player list. So get game state cast to BP main game state and update player list like this and hit compile and save. Now this update player list we need to call when someone logins and when someone logs out. So let's go ahead and update player list on both of those functions like this. So hit compile and save. Now let's go ahead and test it out. So I will go to my lobby room. It's my VR template map. And here, let's run it from new editor window Pi. So I will make it a little bit bigger so you could see. Now we can create a session here for 6 users. And as you can see here, we have joined. And that's basically our name. So it will be a name of your computer. And the way we're going to set up names, I'll do tutorials later on. And as you can see here, we cannot kick ourselves. And it says you can't kick yourself. And I cannot click this button. So once someone joins the session, so let's look for the session on this client. And as we can see, our join button will appear here. Let's connect. And now here's our server. We're able to kick our client. You will see desktop, blah, 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 those name. We're able to kick it. And on our client side, this is our server side, we do not see kick buttons because we don't have enough permissions to kick someone if we are not the host of the server. And you may ask me, why do I see the host here? But I don't see the host here. And the reason for this is that we haven't covered the whole concept of replication. So now basically our client will not know who the host is, but only the host will know that he is the host right here. You can leave it as it is. Maybe you want some privacy in your game and you want your players not to know who is the host. Once I explain the replication concept and we'll get more familiar with it, I'll definitely come back to this and we'll allow other players to see the host. And also we'll make a player count so everyone could see how many players are currently in the lobby. But for now, let's go ahead and implement our kick button because for now we don't have functionality for it. So here, when we want to kick someone, we will actually need to work with our player controller because each player has its own player controller and usually all of those kind of events should be on player controller. So what we have to do, we'll have to go to our BP main player controller, the one we have created in last session, and let's create a custom event here. So I will call it owning client kick player. So this function we need to set to run on owning client replication mode. So what is the difference between run on owning client and basically not replicated? And we actually saw that it exists only on our client. So why do we need to set it to run an owning client? So here is the main difference. When we set it to none, the function will not be replicated on the network and other players will not see this function running and basically will not see the change. So let me explain the difference. So here we have replication none, and here we have replication run on owning client. So I will put you a little description here. So here is what it means replication none. So you can read the description like this. And after run on owning client, we'll have the following description because sometimes it's hard to catch on words. So it's better to actually read it and discuss it together. So the main difference is here. Other clients in the multiplayer game will not execute this function and it will not affect their game state. However, if the owning client's player controller is replicated to other clients when set to run an owning client, those clients will see the effects of changes made by this function we're going to write right now. So once we kick player, we're going to open level by name. And again, we're going to copy our VR template name, this function right here. So I will put it right here. And afterwards, we just destroy session. Player controller, we can leave the same because it takes this one that is here by default, the one we are working in, and we can hit compile. And afterwards, we need to make sure that we set replicate to reliable because we want the ability for our client to do some actions on the server. Therefore, it's important to put it as reliable because by default, client is not able to do anything on the server. So here is a little description for you. So what is reliable? Reliable. And I'll put a little comment here too. So here is a description like this. You can go ahead and read it. So now, after actually understanding what is happening, we need to somehow replicate this event to all the clients. Because when someone leaves, we want to notify everyone that this person left. So let's go ahead to our game mode. That's the place we can do it. It's basically our server. And the first thing I want to do is actually, let's go ahead and in our joined players, we'll change its type to BP main player controller because we'll not be able to access the variable. Before it was just player controller and we didn't have access to this function. So now we'll have it. So make sure you hit compile and let's create a function called kick player. In this function, we'll get joined players And also this function will accept our player ID. And just to remind you, player ID is in our player list item here. So player ID, it will get item from joint players using player ID and will call owning client kick player. Afterwards, we can go back to our WB player list item and in button kick, we can get game mode, cast to BP main game mode, and call this function kick player. And player ID is going to be our player ID. And now we are done. Let's compile and test it out. So here we have two separate clients. They are not servers. Let's create a session here for 6 people. And as we can see, we have joined as a host and we are highlighted as a host. Afterwards, we can join a room from a different client. There we go. And now, boom, everything has appeared. We can kick the player. So let's go ahead and try to kick this guy from our game. And as you can see, he has been kicked. And basically this player was deleted from the player list. Also, we can try to do it with 3 players. So you could see how it updates. So let's go ahead and create a session here. So create session for 6 users. Create, and here we basically join, we refresh. So we join from here. As we can see, list is updated. We join from here. And list is updated on all of 3 devices. And again, once the host leaves the room, everyone is kicked. They're receiving connection lost exception from our game instance. And thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope you learned today a lot. And if it seems confusing, it's okay. Just keep practicing, keep learning, keep reading, and everything will be okay. So make sure you leave a like under this video, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.